Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to BookTrek 2022. This is the sequel to BookTrek 2021, an event created by Vin at Revenant Reads, where we read Star Trek fiction. 2021's version was 5 months long to cover 1 month for each of the iconic early Roddenberry era shows, the 5 Star Trek shows that appear before the J.J. Abrams 2019 lens flare movie. And then Star Trek was rebooted after that. It was relaunched for television in so-called New Trek by Alex Kurtzman, who had an explicit political agenda. And that agenda was not that he loved Star Trek. He has no interest in Star Trek at all. He just was given a franchise that he could put slogans and logos all over. And he did that. So we have 5 shows for New Trek. That we are invited to read for the second part of BookTrek 2022, which is Strange New Worlds. Those are Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Lower Decks, Star Trek Prodigy, and the show that's actually called Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And I've been having a rough month of it. I have been having a rough month of BookTrek, the second half of BookTrek 2022. One of the side missions, the away missions that you can do for this month, is instead of reading any books that derive from those 5 shows, you can read some work of science. In Vin's nod to the fact that those original Star Trek shows, the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Star Trek Enterprise, despite all of the psychobabble, the technobabble they often produced in their episodes, they did value science. Very much so. They worked hand in hand with scientific outreach initiatives, scientific education initiatives throughout almost the whole of that 50-year run. I believe that Vin meant this away mission innocently. I don't think it was meant on his part as a dig at the fact that New Trek is not only remarkably scientifically ignorant, but considers a knowledge of science to be scummy patriarchal behavior. The group of people who have desecrated this franchise are very much of the blue checkmark Twitter 2 + 2 = 4 is racism crowd. They're very much of the do the science, women in science, competent or not. Folk knowledge is science. Folk knowledge is science. Folk knowledge is science. They're very much a science denial crowd. So the side mission here to read popular works of science feels extra ironic, an extra twist in the knife. And the temptation is right there, because I've been having such horrible luck with BookTrek 2022, the second half. The temptation has been to just read popular science books for the rest of the month. I've loved reading those kinds of books for a long, long time, although not since Darwin's Origin of the Species, for the wag who suggested that in my inbox. I'm not going to do that. I did it for Shadows of Vesuvius. I want to strongly recommend that book. I could do that for every day remaining in BookTrek. I could do a work of popular science, either one that I've talked about already on this channel and praised, like Dinosaur Heresies, The Ancestor's Tale, Spooky Action at a Distance, 99 Theorems, What Algorithms Want. There are a whole bunch. I like to keep my mind open to them on a steady basis. They are a steady part of what I read, but that would be avoiding the monster in the room, which is to actually read this stuff and try to like some of it. Now, I have read every New Trek book that has been published by the mainstream publishing arm of Paramount Studios. There aren't many. I've read them all. We're going on 5 years of this stuff. By the time The Next Generation was 5 years old, 5 seasons old, 5 years old, by the time the original series had been 5 years off the air, there were hundreds of books. Now we're still in single digits, as far as I know, or close to it. Certainly not 20. And quite a few of these products, these different franchises, have no books at all. Nevertheless, I read them all, And they were all atrocious. They were all, even when they were written by talented authors, they were very bad in terms of books. They absolutely required you to not only know the show in a different medium, not in a book, but also to sort of be willing to jog along and fill in the blanks. They wanted you to do a lot of the work. And I've been complaining about this when I've made videos. Again, like with the other events that I'm a part of in September. I'm sorry that I've let days go by when I haven't made videos. And again, like with those other events, my only excuse is that my co-hosts have been equally silent. So at least I'm keeping pace with the usual video production schedule. Uh, but I've mentioned in previous videos that there just isn't anything there. I don't believe that New Trek has any fans except for Strange New Worlds. I watched all of Strange New Worlds. The first season just recently ended, and I can see it having fans. I don't believe that any of the other shows do. I would have considered it the rankest, neck-bearded, quasi-fascist, alt-right nonsense of a conspiracy theory a year ago to say that all the people out there who are claiming to be real fans of these shows are planted shills, paid and planted shills by the studio. Now I'm not so sure. Having seen what's been going on with the Rings of Power on Amazon, I'm not so sure now that if you have 5,000 viewers, 5,000 subscribers on YouTube, I'm not so sure that someone hasn't sent you a private email saying, here's a check to buy your shill. I don't believe that, aside from Strange New Worlds, which I can see generating enthusiasm. In fact, we had a bunch of people, and I had a Voxer group which was dedicated to us watching episodes. And that group included some people who didn't know Star Trek, some people who knew Star Trek very well. And I think it's safe to say that by the end of the first season of Strange New Worlds, everyone in that group was completely won over. I think I was probably the biggest skeptic to begin with, and I was completely won over by the end. So I can understand, I could believe it if Strange New Worlds was generating fans, but apparently I'm alone in that. Apparently the studio doesn't believe that, because they're not putting out books. There should be 10 of them by now, or 5. There aren't any. I think one Strange New Worlds novel is due to come out soon, long after BookTrek 2022 is over. I will read it, but nothing else. A handful of Picard novels, most of which don't have anything to do. What can you do? What kind of a novel can you tell? Most of the novels don't have anything to do with Picard. Most of the Discovery novels, it's like the lawyers for New Trek told the writers of Star Trek fiction, you can write a book about Star Trek Discovery. Just don't mention Star Trek Discovery. Don't bring anything up. And good luck to you. here's your poverty wages. I don't know. I don't know any details behind the scenes of any of that, but I have an inescapable impression that the original Star Trek novels, the Star Trek novels for those first 5 franchises, were undertaken, contracted even, in a drastically different way than the pittance of novels that we're getting now. I read my way through them all, the ones that exist, and didn't like anything that I read. It's entirely possible to do. Not so much with Star Trek Discovery, but which, it not only breaks canon and continuity for the show going back 50 years, the show whose name it's using to garner popularity, what little popularity it has garnered, it not only breaks that continuity and that lore, it scorns it. It mocks the lore. So, not that. But the other shows, there are all kinds of good novels that you could write about, for instance, Star Trek Prodigy. There are adventures that our crew could have, and the crew is very interesting. I mean, there's a plot line that sort of ensnares them in maybe 5 episodes to deal with the plot line that's generated in the first episode of Star Trek Prodigy. But after that, you're safe as houses. You are free and clear to navigate. You could have adventures, and they would be interesting. You could even pitch them for a YA crowd. But if that's been done, I've missed it, and I've looked. Lower Decks, I'm not sure that you could do anything with, but you could certainly do. I think there's a comic book of Lower Decks. I don't think you could write a novel about it. It's too inconsequential. There are great novels to be written in and around Star Trek Picard. Uh, Fantastic novels that I don't think are ever going to be written. I don't think that anyone has the legal authority to write them, which is a terrible shame. To dangle this kind of wealth of material in front of us and then forbid any stories to be told about it. And Strange New Worlds, of course, is made for it. Strange New Worlds is largely, it's not completely, it should be completely, but it's largely the old Roddenberry pattern of Star Trek storytelling, so-called bottle episodes, where there's a crisis in the episode, it's addressed in the episode, it's solved in the episode ends. Then you go on to the next one and you repeat the pattern. Strange New Worlds has threaded some larger stories through its first season that sort of counteract that. I don't like that. I don't agree with it at all. It should never be true with Star Trek that you come in to an episode and have no idea what's going on because you had to have watched 10 other episodes. I even disagreed with that when it happened in Deep Space Nine, and Deep Space Nine made epic storytelling out of it. I still disagreed with it. But in something like in Strange New Worlds, it's kept to a minimum. So that book could be good down the line when it finally shows up. But in the meantime, there's nothing else. I went looking on fan fiction sites like Wattpad or fanfiction.net. I found quite a bit of stuff in both places, mostly people remaking Star Trek Discovery. But also people writing about their favorite characters. A lot of the problem with reading those things, I do it with the most enthusiasm and compassion in the world, but a lot of fan fiction is just irredeemably awful. It's not meant to be anything else. The writers would be the first ones to admit that they're just working out love to see it ideas on paper. They're not trying to craft anything. I know that. Most of them aren't, and I know that, so I read it with that consideration in mind. But one of you, to get to the topic of today's video, one of you is a fan of fanfiction.net. I assume you're watching. If so, hello. I'm not going to reveal anything. This person does not want their name to be known. They don't even want their pen name to be known for fanfiction.net. But this person was happy to see me mention fanfiction.net. They're a big fan of the site and have written a lot for it on many different shows, books, movies, TV shows that they like. That's one of the appeals of fanfiction.net, is that no matter what it is, you can write on it. So if you, let's say there's some unknown canceled TV show, and you always wished that you could tell a story in the setting of that unknown canceled TV show. Let's say Going to Extremes. I'm sure that none of you remember Going to Extremes. Roy Dotrice in Going to Extremes. Well, let's say that there was a story that you wanted to tell on the beautiful island of Jantique, and that the storytellers hadn't got around to telling. You could do it on fanfiction.net, and you're not expecting to win any Pulitzers, but it scratches that itch. And the person I'm talking about here, I assume you're watching, not only is a big fan of fanfiction.net, but did a little bit of digging around on fanfiction.net, which impressed and amazed me. I have mentioned many times that I'm on fanfiction.net in a few places. And this person took it upon themselves to say, well, I've watched thousands of Steve videos, and I've read thousands of Steve reviews. I wonder if, I know his tastes, in other words, so I know where to look. Fanfiction.net has probably 1 million stories on it. I know his tastes. I know where to look. I wonder if I picked something that I know he likes and went there and started reading all of the stories, could I pick out a story that he wrote? Would I be able to tell just from the prose? And this person sent me a new Trek story. That is my new Trek video for today. It's a story that you can't read. You'll never be able to read. It's not even on fanfiction.net. It was a purely private story that is called Imposter Syndrome. And the sort of unofficial tagline that the person told me goes with the story is a Star Trek Discovery story written as though Star Trek Discovery were Star Trek. And by that, the person means to go give the crew of the Discovery a bottle episode adventure, only write it as if it were actual Star Trek, meaning that the understanding of the adventure, the understanding of the problem, the solving of the problem is a team effort. It's not everyone else failing because they're bigots and then Michael Burnham saves the day because she's perfect. Instead, it's a team effort. There are things that Michael Burnham doesn't know how to do. There are things that other people on the ship do better than Michael Burnham. There's humor that isn't endless self-validation. I know I'm great. I know I'm awesome. Boy, I'm even more awesome than I thought. There's humor, yes, but it's not endless self-validation. And there's also, Starfleet protocol and even discipline of the service. So when a superior officer gives someone an order, the someone doesn't say, I guess so, seems kind of dumb to me though, out loud, in full hearing of the rest of the bridge, in full hearing of the superior officer, and is never court-martialed. Why? Because they're a little on the chubby side, or they claim to be non-binary, or whatever. That happens all the time in Star Trek Discovery. Well, I'll do it, I guess. It seems like a pretty dumb idea, though. Said directly to your superior officer. And that's considered mild. It's also acceptable in Star Trek Discovery to nerve pinch your superior officer to commit actual mutiny because you're so woke you know better. That's just scrubbed from Imposter Syndrome. All of that is scrubbed. And also some time is put into the personalities of other people rather than simply their identity politics check marks. That is not done, mostly not done on the show. Mostly the show is Twitter politics. So the main male character is a big willowy alien whose Twitter checkbox is, I am the opposite of toxic masculinity. No matter what you consider to be toxic masculinity, I'm going to be the opposite of that. And that's all I am. I'm not going to be anything else. You're never going to learn anything more about me than that. I am the defiantly present gay person. That's 2/3 of the crew of the Discovery. But they all have the same note of defiant presence, that sort of Rosa Parks on the bus, chip on the shoulder presence, as if it were the 1840s. That's gone. All of that Twitter posturing from Star Trek Discovery is gone in Imposter Syndrome, but the characters are still there. And I have to say, I know this is useless because you literally can't read this story, but at least I'm going to go out of Star Trek Discovery on a good note because the person who wrote this has talent. And it works. But unbelievably, it works. When you translate the raw elements of Star Trek Discovery into Star Trek, it actually works. Frida, what are you doing, baby? Oh, she was grabbing for something. I couldn't figure out what it was. It was just out of her reach. I wondered if she's going to need my help, but it was her little. She has a little stuffed Wookiee. My surly houseboy tossed her a little stuffed Wookiee, and I thought she was long past. She ignored her toys for years, but this one she seems to like. So she actually found it. Okay, come here. Oh God, she has it in her mouth. I want to show you. What's that, baby? What's that? It's a little Wookiee. There's the highlight of the video. So anyway, the reason that I mention this I can't direct you to the story. You can't ever read it. But the reason that I mention it is because I was kind of hoping for it. I didn't realize how much I was, but I was hoping to end this part of BookTrek 2022 on a positive note. And I did. I did. Totally unlooked for. With Imposter Syndrome, I ended it on a positive note. I have read what Star Trek Discovery could have been like if it had been created before social media. And now I know. Well, that was a wonderful thing. So the person who sent it to me, thank you very much. I'm going to move on from there. I'm not going to deal with standard new Trek at all. I'm not going to deal with Star Trek Discovery and its Messiah, Michael Burnham. I'm not going to deal with Star Trek Lower Decks or Star Trek Prodigy, which are little will-o'-the-wisps. Not much effort or time has been put into them. I'm not going to deal with Star Trek Picard with its tortured babies and eyeballs being ripped out of people's heads. I'm not going to deal with Star Trek Picard until the final season, which is the reunion of all the original cast for one last go. I have a prediction about the final season of Star Trek Picard. I have a prediction. I'm 100% certain that all of these original characters, Dr. Crusher, Counselor Troy, Commander Riker, Worf, especially Worf, Geordi LaForge, I have a feeling that these characters are being called onto the show, that the whole purpose of the story arc of the final season of Star Trek Picard is to humiliate them, to show sort of a grumpy old men type thing, where they're not capable anymore and have to be outdone by the endlessly self-validating, posturing new characters. That's my feeling, is that that's what's going to happen. If Star Trek Picard in its final season learns a lesson from Star Trek Strange New Worlds and doesn't do that, instead gives Star Trek The Next Generation fans the thing they've wanted forever, for how long has it been since the last Star Trek The Next Generation movie? It's been 10 years, something like that. If the showrunners decide, let's give them that, instead of giving them what we know they'll hate, well, then that final series could be really, really good. I'm not looking forward to that. I am expecting that they will traduce these characters, that they will bring them on to traduce them. So I might talk about that when it happens, especially if I'm lucky enough to be proven wrong. But in the meantime, I'm going to devote the rest of BookTrek 2022 to Strange New Worlds, to the actual show, Strange New Worlds. The month is called Strange New Worlds. I'm going to devote the rest of the month to Strange New Worlds, talking about it, and then I've resisted reading a lot of the fan fiction and the Wattpad fiction and whatnot. I'll read all of that now. I don't think there's anything else to read. I'll look all around. I'll report back tomorrow, I'm hoping. I'm hoping that I'm not going to keep letting the side down of my reading events. BookTrek especially is close to my heart. So that's your BookTrek video for today, Imposter Syndrome. To the author, a very vigorous thumbs up. And to Star Trek Discovery, not at all fond farewell. I will not be thinking about this wretched travesty of Star Trek again, if I can help it. If it is invoked in any way in next year's BookTrek, I will simply ignore the invocation. I don't want to think about this show again. Picard, a little, maybe. The other shows, sure, absolutely. And Strange New Worlds, yes. Let's talk about Strange New Worlds next time. I'll see what I can find to talk about. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you, BookTube.